To get started with our talk today, Maddie and I will be talking about the intersectionality between gender and bullying in medicine, and specifically with a focus on graduate medical education and residency. So just to recap what bullying is. So bullying consists of acts of commission or omission that are seen as negative and unwelcome and tend to be repeated. They often involve power imbalances and are abusive despite conscious intent, if that is there or not. So we just want to also emphasize that it's defined in its effect on the recipient rather than the intention of the bully. The victim is negatively impacted regardless or not of whether or not the bully intended to do this, and it's often a disconnect between the person who is the recipient versus the perpetrator of bullying behavior. And bullying behavior is often very persistent. Sort of what are the most common types of bullying? There are 10 common types that were sort of identified in many lit reviews. And these types include nonverbal innuendo, verbal affront, undermining activities, withholding information, sabotage, infighting, scapegoating, backstabbing, failure to respect privacy, and broken confidences. So looking at the gender disparity in bullying by type of bullying, one study examined workplace bullying between family physicians. And they found that women were more often than men to report their opinions being ignored, lack of recognition for a job well done, pressure to not claim something that they were entitled to, and being exposed to an unmanageable workload. On the other hand, men were more likely to report having their mistakes exaggerated and having allegations made against them as instances of bullying when they didn't perceive it as such. In terms of frequency, looking at specific bullying behaviors, they found them more frequently reported in individuals who identified as female, non-white, who were shorter than 5'8", and had a BMI greater than 25. In the most frequently reported bullying behaviors included destructive innuendo, sarcasm, and attempts to humiliate. So looking at the gender disparity in bullying and the contributing factors, some things that contribute include a gender learning curve on the wards. So for individuals who identify as female, there's often a lack of equitable mentorship and different perceived expectations of male versus female medical students that are inconsistent and often unspoken and create a lot of stress in individuals who present as female and in adjusting to the ward environment. And a common coping mechanism is something called acculturation. And we'll talk a little bit more about this with the study, but it's a difficult transition to clerkship alone. So oftentimes to cope with the gender learning curve, a lot of women individuals who identified as women might accept this culture or try to work into it and optimize chances of success and reduce stress. So I think there should be transitions. Yeah. So one study looked at the effect of gender on clinical clerkship students and found that many female medical students were surprised to find themselves defaulting to these self-described stereotypical feminine roles in care, such as focusing on assisting nursing or support staff, nurturing patients, or becoming more apologetic. And then interestingly, they found that they hypothesize that people in this setting decide to increase their success and change to adapt to this organizational culture over time. And women, as they move through medical school, oftentimes reported less and less bullying as the years went on because of this overall cultural and structural influence. So moving on to bullying in different clinical settings, one study of medical residents and graduate medical education found that the most common sources on the wards included attendings at 29% and nurses at 27%, followed by patients, peers, consultants, and staff. And as we're reporting, the most frequently bullying behaviors include attempts to belittle and undermine someone else's work, unjustified criticism and monitoring of work, destructive innuendo, sarcasm, and attempts to humiliate. And we already went over the demographics. So there are other studies that look closely at bullying in other groups of health professionals that we also wanted to highlight. And we noted that there were instances of horizontal bullying among nurses as well. And 8 out of 9 bullying behaviors have been observed by the majority of nurses, including covert or overt verbal affront, scapegoating, and undermining clinical activities. And many nurse participants were actually surprised to find that many of these behaviors were categorized as bullying. The individuals who are perpetrating it often say that they were caught up in the moment or adopted the behaviors because it was part of this culture, which speaks to the sort of the acculturation hypothesis in coping. And in the family physician study, they found that 10% of family physicians acknowledged bullying someone in the workplace, and 30% had been personally bullied in the workplace. And this sort of disconnect really highlights what we were talking earlier about individuals who perceive bullying are, and the victims are distinct from those who, how the perpetrators view the bullying. And looking at general surgery residents by nurses, they found that oftentimes nurses ignore the recommendations or orders on daily, weekly, or monthly basis for 30.2% of residents. And nurses also commonly ignore the resident when they approach or react in a hostile manner, or ignored or exclude the resident.
So why does this matter? There's a big pay gap in women versus men physicians. So as you can see here, the women make a lot less than men do. And this is something that's been going on for a really long time. And it hasn't really changed dramatically since women have become physicians, and it's been a more common path for women to be a physician. So this is just another graph. It's kind of showing in the different regions in the US, the pay gap differential. So in the Midwest, as you can see, females actually make a little bit more than males. But however, in the Northeast and the South, there are significant differences in what women versus men are paid. And in the West, there is still a difference, but it's not as dramatic as between the Northeast and the South. So this is the salary distribution by sex. As you can see, the men are the dark blue. A lot of them there's a wider distribution of what male physicians make, but in females, the pay distribution is a lot more condensed, and it's a lot closer to around $200,000. So why does this matter? Despite similar goals and achievements, women in academic medicine are less likely to achieve professorship. They're less likely to hold leadership positions in their department, and are less likely to maintain a career in academia. And this table is just showing the attainment of full professorship in women. And as you can see, women need a lot more publications to become full professors than men. Men often get full professorship before women with less publications. So this is just another graph kind of showing the same thing. Women and men are pretty much 50-50 in medical school, but as you go up the ranks, there are a lot less women and a lot more men. And there are adverse effects of workplace bullying. A lot of women feel like they're the victims of workplace bullying, like we were talking about earlier. So some of the adverse effects that can happen are hypertension, insomnia, GI problems, and mental health issues like post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and suicidal ideation. And this quote is just a quote that stuck out to us. The suicide rate of male physicians is 40% higher in the general male population, and that of the female physicians is 130% higher than in the general female population. And this statistic is really striking. 130% higher is way higher, obviously, than just the general population, and it shouldn't be that way. So what can be done? The AMA Joint Commission has set out some guidelines to help combat workplace bullying. The first says to educate all team members on appropriate professional behavior defined by the organization's code of conduct. This code should emphasize respect and include training in basic business etiquette with phone skills and people skills. They want to develop and implement policies and procedures appropriate for the organization, including zero tolerance policies for intimidating and disruptive behaviors, especially assault and other criminal acts, protect those who report or cooperate in the investigation, and hear and emphasize victims' concerns and thank them for sharing their concerns, as well as apologizing. Also gives recommendations on how and when to begin disciplinary actions like suspension, termination, and loss of clinical privileges. They also encourage to hold all team members accountable and enforce the code consistently and equitably among all staff, regardless of seniority or clinical discipline. They want to solicit and integrate substantial input from an interprofessional team, including representation of medical and nursing staff, administrators, and other employees. And they want to develop and implement a reporting and surveillance system for detecting unprofessional behaviors and monitor the system effectiveness through regular surveys, focus groups, peer and team member evaluations, as well as other methods. They also encourage support surveillance with tiered non-confrontational strategies, with interventions being non-adversarial in nature, with the focus on building trust, placing accountability on and rehabilitating the offending individual, and protecting the patient's safety. They also want to document all attempts to address intimidating and disruptive behaviors. So in summary, the primary goal of the Joint Commission should be to improve care relationships by increasing understanding and responsiveness to the individual needs, provide training in diversity, stress, anger, and conflict management, improve communication and collaboration skills, and enhance an organizational culture that respects and supports physicians, staff, and patient-centered care. So if you have any experience that you want to share with us, I can stop sharing my screen. And something that really struck out to me with, I guess, just being in the wards this year is the different cultures, I guess, with the different specialties. Because I feel like in some specialties, there's a lot more bullying and like the studies were saying, it's not always like, well, or it's not always meant to be bullying. It's just people getting stressed out when patient care is involved. And then they take that out on people lower than them in the rankings in a different way. That is definitely bullying, but they just, I guess, don't realize it.
Yeah, I definitely have also seen that happen. And I think that it's like sort of the acculturation phenomenon we were sort of talking about earlier in the talk, where it's like you don't really recognize it as bullying and everyone kind of accepts it because it's just the culture. You give excuses, but at its core, when we think about it and reflect upon it, it's okay to not accept that as like a standard. But also I've noticed interesting changes, like reactionary changes to interventions against bullying. When I was on service earlier last year, I got some interesting comments from, I think, older physicians who are like, oh, now we have these like feedback forms and they matter a lot, so I can't make the same jokes that I used to. And I thought that was an interesting reaction and a lot of good space to like talk through things. But I think it also speaks to how difficult it is to intervene in bullying on even a structural level, because these sort of change has to come from every single level for it to be effective.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think some professors still are kind of like, oh, like, haha, this form, it's so stupid. Like, I don't understand why I have to fill this out, which is really frustrating because they, I guess, don't see the shift that we're trying to make in medicine, because they, I guess, went through medical school like in the 70s where it was like a boys club kind of. So I feel like it's interesting, like talking to them versus talking to everyone else that's like more involved in its change.
Yeah, it's definitely like a generational and gender gap between those things. But I think I'm also heartened to see a lot of change in how people interact in the wards, even from students who are a couple years older than me. Listening to their experiences and comparing them to my experiences now, I can already notice like a marked change in how medical students, especially female medical students, are treated. So making strides, hopefully.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
I think if we don't have anything else, we can probably get started with the next segment if Dr. Kant is available for that.
I am. I'll just share my screen here. How are you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
Excellent. So share my screen here. That was a good discussion.
Yeah. It's a tough discussion.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can do a quick intro. And please pronounce your name. Is it Kant or Kant?
Yeah, I can. Yeah,
okay, great.
Like I can't do anything, that kind of thing.
Okay, fantastic. So Dr. Sam Kant, he is a nephrology fellow at Johns Hopkins. He's completed internal medicine.
Nephrology, yes.
Transplant, yes. Internal medicine residency and chief residency at University of Maryland. His research interests include ANCA vasculitis, transplant immunology, and epidemiology. He's also co-chair of the ACP MD Maryland Young Physicians Council. And he's here to speak with us about beyond medical school and practical tips for our futures.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction and letting me speak here. I've had a good involvement with the Students' Corner since since I was a resident, and it's probably one of the best segments of the annual meeting. But today's topic, I thought, I'm coming to the end of my training. I guess I can't really say that, right? Because we're lifelong learners. But as I look back into my rear view mirror, I think about things that, I've learned. And I think I'm still continuing to learn about our, meandering course in medicine. But, as we go along in medical school, I think the focus is so much on knowledge, right? In the end, we're tested on knowledge. Our scores in the end determine where we go for residency. So there is an inordinate amount of focus on knowledge. So as time has gone on, we've realized that there are challenges facing medical education. This seminal article from Peter Denson, in 2011, shows that as time has gone on, the time for doubling of medical knowledge is decreasing. So if you look at the 1950s, medical knowledge used to double every 50 years. Now it's every 73 days. So there is a stark change in the amount that's coming through and the frequency. So, to be honest, to keep up with the medical knowledge, I don't think you'll ever amass everything. In the end, there's only going to be some amounts that you'll have, but there are other things beyond knowledge that I wish I learned, as I was in medical school and transitioning towards residency. I frequently thought that I would look like this, when I was going to residency, but I frequently felt like this. And I think there are certain things that I wish I knew, and I know I'll keep repeating that. I wish I knew. And I hope I could share that with you. It's constantly evolving. And I think I'd like this to be a discussion. Please stop me in between if there's anything that you don't agree with. I'd love to have that discussion. And, I think all this has been a confluence of so many things that I've learned from. It's been the books that I've read. It's been the people that I've met or read about. It can frequently be the music that I've heard. And you'll be wondering why he's saying that. And podcasts. A special section on podcasts at the end. But, there have been in various ways in which I've been influenced over the course of my training. And I hope I can pick out something from each of these sections to talk to you about. A recent book that I read from Adam Grant, if you can follow him on Twitter, he's got these pearls. I just keep thinking, I don't know where he gets them from. He's probably one of the most original thinkers that I know around. And I think he's an organizational psychologist at Wharton. And the stuff he comes up with is excellent. So in his book, he shares a very good anecdote from this Finnish American photographer. His name is Arno Mikkonen. And Arno Mikkonen talks about the Helsinki bus theory. So in Helsinki, there are very few platforms from which buses leave. And for the first 5 miles, they follow the same route. They follow the same route. And a lot of times tourists get on them and they get frustrated. And then within the first 5 miles, they're off the bus because they think it's not really going anywhere. But it's after the 5 mile mark that it actually diverges and goes to extremely unique locations. What's the correlation with medicine? I think we're all looking for originality about, I'd like to have pave my own path. And, for a number of years, nothing really comes out of the path that you're on. And we're tempted to switch gears and think, okay, this is not really working out for me. Maybe I should try research, or even within research, I'm going to go try something else. But Arno Mikkonen says, stay on the bus. It's important you stay on the bus for whatever period there is. It's after the 5 mile mark that really things change and you can easily get your own unique route. So I wish I learned that. And I know I'll keep saying that. I wish I did. And I wish this. And it's the absolute truth. I think I wish I knew that, staying on one path or staying on one subject that I wanted to would really have helped me. There is a caveat to this. There will be times that you need to quit. But how do you really know? I'll tell you shortly. This one, I think, pretty much should be on most people's table. I don't think that, if you're not a surgeon, even if you're not a surgeon, I think it's an important way of thinking. But, it's not the content in the book, but at the end that I kind of, and there's a epilogue for which Atul Gawande ends where, in the midst of his training, he talks about how every time he'd sit down with colleagues, all he would talk about was complaining about every condition that he encountered. But he realized that it wasn't really good for him. And as you could see, it does rewire your brain from negativity. Believe me, nothing feels better than a good rant. Do that from time to time. But if that becomes your constant, you will never look for a solution. You will always look for problems. And I'm not pulling this fact just out of a hat. There are studies to show that, complaining literally shrinks your hippocampi. Research done at Stanford has shown on serial MRIs that people who characterize themselves as complainers versus people who look for solutions, you could actually trace that their hippocampi were actually shrinking as time went on. So it just doesn't have an effect on the way you think, but it actually an effect on your brain and it structures itself. And the next thing, I'm not making an example of saying that you should follow the path of Jay Gatsby and, go after the love of your life. If you do, please do. But this is not the example that I'm looking for. I mostly talk about F. Scott Fitzgerald here, where I regard this book as one of the finest pieces of literature. And this book in many ways exudes excellent. And, a lot of time it's thrown out to us, right? We are thrown out terms like excellence and resiliency. What does that really mean? What are we really talking about excellence? And if you can inculcate, a habit of having excellence in everything you do, it actually isn't very tiresome. It actually becomes a habit. One of my favorite physicians at my institution, in everything he does, there's always, I can always see there's always excellence. The way he talks to students, the way he talks to, the catering staff, everyone. I think, there's a certain way he conducts himself. And then there's another physician that I really look up to. She's, she's always at the forefront of looking after her patients. She would always be taking calls late into the night. I'm not saying that, you take up everything here, but clearly excellence is not just in your work, but even outside that. And, who better to say than Monet? Every painting of his, you could see that there is excellence exuding that. And it's just not painters as well, right? Sportswomen. Every time you see them perform, it always seems so flawless, and it's just the way they've trained. So the way you've trained, if you can inculcate excellence in everything you do, I think you'll be absolutely fine. And continuing into sports, this is a really good podcast if someone really wants to get into it. It's a sports podcast, and this particular episode 162 with Phil Mickelson, really got to me, where he talks about many famous sports people who've reached the zenith of their sports. Always talk about how even if they've had one bad shot, you notice, say, someone on the tennis court is playing and they have one bad shot, it just continues, and they just keep hitting bad shots. The elite, in the end, after one bad shot, completely let it go and don't dwell on it. Where is this again relating to medicine? I've had situations there where patients have had untoward outcomes, and you will all have them. For even your best intentions and when working hard, sometimes things don't work out, and don't beat yourself about it, because sometimes it jades you and keeps lingering on with you. Learn from it, reflect on it as much as you can, but don't beat yourself about it. Please don't, because in the end, what matters is what you do next. And of course, learn from that experience. And, in many ways, they quoted this Stoic philosopher in the podcast. And, I'm just throwing it out there that in the end, there's so many things that we imagine never come true as a part of those untoward incidents. Just realize that in the end, a lot of this is what we've made up in our heads. It's not the reality. You are a good physician. Remember that. And where can I start about mentors? It's a really good talk by Tony Jian, if you could ever watch it, on mentorship. Again, another term that's thrown out in medicine: mentorship, mentors. Over the years, I've had the fortune of having great mentors. I've not just had one; I've had 4 to 5 in different spheres of medicine. Some mentors, I wouldn't even talk to them about medicine. I'd talk to them about something that'd be struggling in my personal life. So have mentors. Actively seek them out. If there's someone you identify with and you want to be like, reach out to them. I have mentors that I've only communicated via the phone or email. I still haven't met them. COVID hasn't let me meet them, and that's okay. So, people are actually more eager to help than you would think. So, if you really like someone's talk and you'd like to talk to them about your career trajectory, reach out to them, email them. You'd be surprised. They'd be very happy to talk to you. So, actively seek out mentors, even from the start of medical school. If you move to another place, still, I think you'll always find people who are very eager to help you, because they were helped by very good people as well. And, when you said, what is he talking about when he said he learned from music? And, here are the Beatles in Better Days. Feel pretty happy here. And, there's one song, Little Help from My Friends, right? And that always gets me, especially in the hardest times in medicine. We're transitioning into a culture where we're just so engrossed in our screens and engrossed in ourselves, and that's okay. That will, that's the thing that life is transitioning into. But you don't have to. And I'm not just, again, I'm always going to back what I say by science as well. Where there was actually an intervention where they wanted to promote physical well-being, where colleagues would meet up and just talk about even work. I know I used to go to these residency dinners where it would be a taboo to talk about work. But actually, I think that was the best part of those residency dinners, where you discuss aspects about work, complain a little. Like I said, a good rant always feels very good, and please do that. But, I got into this circuitous habit of just, after a tough ICU call, just coming home, ordering takeout and watching Netflix. Some days that's absolutely fine. Please do that. But many a day, try to get out with people. Again, hard with COVID. It's been a hard 2 years to do that. But, on my way back from work, I'd call friends I haven't seen in a long time. I always correlate or equate this. It's like fitness. You don't want to do it at the start. You don't want to make the phone call at the start, but at the end of it, you'll be glad that you went for the run, or you called your friend that you haven't spoken to in a while. And it actually feels pretty good. So, keep that a constant in your life. I think you'll be in great stead. even if it's your, residency friends. Believe me, two of my residency friends were groomsmen at my wedding. Imagine, they displaced high school friends. So I'm not saying that's going to happen to you, but in the end, make sure you connect with people for residency. They will last you a very long time.
Yeah, thank you so much for your talk.
No problem. Anytime.
Yeah.
It ended a bit unceremoniously. There's another slide, but it happens. It's nice to go out with a bang.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, guys. It was good seeing you all.
Good seeing you. Thank you.
Take care of yourself. Bye.
Bye.